time I was a little girl, there was a passion for prayer in our home, because even though we didn't go to church, my mother always prayed. We did prayers before a meal, we did prayers for bedtime, but most importantly, if anything was going wrong, my mom got down on her knees and prayed. When I was finally a parent and had, we had 5 kids, we prayed at meals and we prayed at bedtime, but most importantly, we did what I would call target prayers. So we would stop if there was something that we needed. There are 8,000 promises from God in the Bible, and just letting my kids know they can stand on those promises and tell God, just like they would say, but you said, then I can say to God, but you said you would protect us. You said you would give us guidance. You said you would be there and never leave me. And so we did what I would call a lot of target prayers, where we would just stop. And I think to this day, my kids have all taught their kids to pray those target prayers. My favorite style of prayer is most likely listening to God. And I've had to learn to do that, because at first it was like, I'd just make the whole list and say, and I want this, and I want this, and I want this. But listening to Him after I've interceded for people. And I do a lot of intercessory prayer. I pray for others, but then listening to what God's promising for them. And that's, to me, is really special. And an example would be if I'm praying for people who have cancer, and I say, God, my will would be that you would just heal them all and take care of it. And that may not be your will right now, but I'm going to trust your perfect will. And then I get quiet. And sometimes I just hear that small piece of, you know what, it's going to be okay because I'm going to be with them. In prayer, we don't always hear an audible voice from God. In fact, I've never heard God's voice talking to me except once. And in that time, wow, it was a really dark time in my life. And our daughter was 16. She was making some really bad choices. And I know there are lots of parents that can relate to that. And by the time she was 18, she had left home. She was pursuing a lifestyle that I was just brokenhearted. And she'd also cut off all ties with us. She didn't. And as an adoptive mom, that's really tough, because, you choose them, and then she was not choosing us. And I prayed a lot about it, and I prayed for her safety, and I prayed all of those things, but I was just heartbroken, just truly heartbroken. And at 3 a.m, I couldn't sleep, and I went downstairs, and I was just saying, God, please just let me get through this. Let me, help her and bring her back to us, and, cover her. And I was praying all of these things. And then I sat to listen. And I know this sounds like freaky and supernatural, and I can't explain it in my own personal self. But I had a vision of a book coming down. And the pages of the book were turning. And I heard God say, Dana, you are not in this chapter, but I am the author and the finisher of her life. That changed my prayer life forever. I began to listen more instead of talk more. And I really understood that I almost longed to hear that voice again. And God doesn't always speak that way, and He never has again. But I think He knew at that moment that's what I needed. And now, 30 years later, she's fully restored to our family, living a much healthier lifestyle. And, you can see God's hand in it and all. But just, I think prayer has changed my life by listening more to what He has to say, knowing His word. Because often that's what comes up to me is His word. So for example, when I'm saying, I know I'm anxious about this, God, I know I am, and then I get quiet, and I'm reminded of the verse that says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything make your request known to God. If somebody out there is praying for something that they prayed for a long time, and they want that answer, and they're frustrated because they're not getting an answer, my biggest advice would be to know that God's timing is not my timing. And His timing is better, and that there is much to learn in the waiting. It says, You know, in the Bible in James it says, count it all joy when you fall into temptation, because the trying of your faith produces patience. And it has produced patience, and it will produce patience. So if you're waiting for an answer, don't give up, because every prayer is heard by God and loved by God. He wants to hear from us, and His timing is perfect.